Hi, everybody. Yeah, long history, long experience. I'm not going to waffle on for too long. Some of the slides are very wordy. I apologize. It's for the PDF's purposes, more to share, but there's a bit of a hero's journey in there. So from an agenda perspective, just to give you guys an idea what we'll be going through, is a couple of key points as to why you need a deployment strategy, how Octopus and Unily has gone through this journey from the last 7 years of doing deployments at Unily alone, and even some of the cases before that. And then more than likely, lessons learned, net dollar retention, very key points into any deployment strategy. How does net dollar retention even get into a deployment strategy and why it's so important? And if time permits, showcase in a Q&A. So I'll try and start the clock now and then hopefully not talk too much. Okay. So Octopus, thanks for inviting me to be a speaker. We've, like I've mentioned, used Octopus for the last 7 years. We went really from a startup position to an enterprise with Octopus, going from deploying 30 sites a month, maybe one every odd day, to deploying thousands on a monthly basis. We've gone from hybrid into VMs into now Kubernetes world, where we're now starting to use Octopus as well. Unily, just so you know what it is, it's an intranet-based on SaaS platform. So it's for a user engagement experience. We've fortunate enough to sign up clients like McDonald's, Shell, J&J, British Airways. From an intranet platform, we've won numerous awards. And as you can imagine, deployment strategy on a system like this is rather vital. And it's been a fun little challenge for the last 7 years, I can tell you that much. Going from a user base of 20,000 people using Unily, we're up to, I think, roughly just over the 5 million mark at the moment. Okay, so why did we choose Octopus to go through this journey? Is a lot of reasons. The hero's journey you'll hear at the end, where we go from a startup to an enterprise, is probably security and compliance and API first is the two biggest reasons why we chose Octopus back then and why we are still using it to today. There's numerous other reasons which I'll hopefully cover off through some of these slides as we go through it. So let's dig into it. A deployment strategy. Why do you need one? What is a deployment strategy? What are some of the things you need to consider as part of a deployment strategy? It is key. And if you don't take a deployment strategy to heart, you are going to fail. Your software is not going to make it to market, even if that market is internal. It may make it the first few times, but after a year or two, as the systems will grow, you're going to start feeling the pain of it. Slides. There we go. So reliability and stability. Key factor, and this is almost in order of precedence where I would go with this. Downtime is a big factor of any deployment. I don't know how many of you guys have done deployments and you've gone to a client and you go, oh, we need to deploy your site, and the client goes, why? It's downtime, okay? If the right strategy is implemented, you can reduce that and you can get the clients up. For a startup, this was absolute key for Unily, getting the features out to the clients. You can't sell a new product if you don't have the features, and your competitors will absolutely destroy you. So it was a vital piece for us to actually have that correct. Resource optimization with a startup, and even at enterprise level, money is king. You can go from a very, very streamlined system into a bad deployment strategy and spend hundreds of thousands, even millions on resources that you don't require purely because of a bad strategy that you've implemented. And improved collaboration. And this collaboration is not just internal, it's also external with your clients. You can have better collaboration with your development teams, your QA team, your operations, support even, which seems to, for some reason in the development lifecycle, always suffers in the end of the pipeline. You get that collaboration correct, they'll know about the features, clients will be happier, everybody works together for a better system. Scalability, big part of a deployment strategy. This is probably the most one point where I would say you shouldn't think now. You should think 5 years, 10 years in the future. The decisions you make today on a deployment strategy can impact you negatively years down the line. I've been fortunate enough to experience that firsthand, where you can go from a decision you've made 5 years ago, it comes back to bite you, where you don't want it to bite you, because it's painful. And then you have to spend hundreds and thousands, if not millions, to correct those mistakes from the past. So you have to think of the future. Which brings us to cost. An effective deployment strategy can reduce your running cost of deployments dramatically. And it's not just physical costs of equipment or infrastructure in the cloud. It's also your operational expenditure, having engineers doing those deployments, which brings you back to saying to a client, I have to deploy these fixes to your site, or I have to deploy the new features, or for whatever reason. And the client goes, great, but you're not doing that during my business hours. You will do that on a weekend when my users are not using the site, which means you now have to use engineers on a weekend, pay them overtime. That's expenditure. With means of a proper strategy with automation and all that in mind, you don't need to have that problem facing you every single time you need to go to a client and say, we need to do a deployment. And I have to reiterate, client is also internal. I've seen so many water cooler talks where people complain about systems in their company. Oh, it's down again. How many times have you heard that? Better customer experience. It's the water cooler talk. Also, happy clients remain clients. If you don't have a happy client base, they will walk. It's a fact of life. I've never heard of a company retaining clients and none of the clients were upset with their vendor. And these days, especially with vendors out there, it's plural. I don't think there's a single system out there that doesn't have a competitor out in the marketplace. So you have to stay competitive. You have to keep your clients happy. There's loads of ways of doing that, and hopefully I can bring some of that out today. And then last but not least, risk management. 7 years ago, on that journey, when I started deployments, risk was the least of my worry. I had 30 clients, small user base. I was a proper cowboy walking down the hallways. Deploy, yeah, sure, done. That doesn't happen today. 5.5 million user base, almost counting, I think, 470 clients at the moment. I can't just press a button. I have to take risk management seriously. Why didn't I do it back then? Because now I'm going through the hard lessons of it. With a proper deployment strategy, you can take risk management into the cadence of your deployments. It also falls back to ITIL and change management and all of that. Consider it as part of your deployment strategy. So what are the key deployment strategies out there? And this is more of a techie side of it, because now we've done the business bit, so I have to satisfy the tech somehow. Right, first off, blue-green. Blue-green being you'll have a running version of a site or software. You'll deploy the second version. Once that version's up and running, you'll switch over to it, and then the other one will go down. Essentially what it is. It's a stoplight deployment process. Canary, which for some reason my head always goes canary. Don't know why. It is a deployment strategy where you essentially deploy to a small subset of people. So imagine you are all users of a system. I would deploy, this desk will get the new features, no one else. And I'll get feedback from that user base. Whoops, that's one too quick. Rolling deployment is essentially where you have multiple or vast infrastructure pieces. Kubernetes is quite popular for doing rolling deployments, where you'll deploy out to one part of the infrastructure and then the next and then the next and then the next. As you're rolling out to that infrastructure, it'll not be available for usage during that. And there's some key benefits to that as well. Feature toggles is you roll out whichever other way you choose, and then you only turn the feature on once you're ready. Goes live for everybody. And then the big brother of blue-green deployment, immutable deployments, where you essentially spend a hell of a lot more money, but you spin up brand new infrastructure, deploy everything, switch over to that, and then kill off the infrastructure. It is literally the big brother of blue-green, because blue-green runs on the same infrastructure, whereas immutable is on brand new infrastructure. Okay. Imagine setting up a brand new Kubernetes cluster and nodes and pods with its service configurations. You can do that with something like Flux, for example. Whereas a blue-green, you'll use the same Kubernetes cluster and nodes out there. So the advantages of these deployment strategies. Blue-green, very quick to roll out. It's very automatable. It's a big fan out there. There's a lot of documentation around blue-green deployments. Octopus on their website's got some great blog posts about it. Canary, see, stuck in my head. Canary deployments. I'm not a big fan of it because you have to consider still some of the other deployment strategies because it doesn't consider downtime. That's why I'm not a big fan of it. It is great if you a feature-rich system and you in the starting phases and you need testing on those features, but you don't want to expose those features to the entire infrastructure or the audience. Rolling deployments is zero downtime. It's great for testing, and it means that the infrastructure is not available till it's actually in use. So it's a brilliant strategy. It's also one of the more popular ones alongside blue-green deployments. Those two are probably the most popular strategies adopted today. Feature toggles, absolutely loved by operational people and end users because you can turn stuff on and off. It's a feature we use in Unily quite extensively as well because it's a feature-rich system. So we have got something in our system called live configuration, which has got a lot of toggles in it. I've stopped counting. But yeah, the support team absolutely loves it. And yeah, the sarcasm in that one. Immutable, it's predictable. It's where your scripts spin up brand new infrastructure. You know exactly what you are getting. It is also the one way of ensuring that what you are getting is fresh, it's new, there's no drift, especially dirty hands have been in there. We all have that engineer or that developer that loves poking at stuff and playing and prodding where they shouldn't. That's the best way of ensuring that what you are deploying is 100% what it needs to be. And like anything else in life, there are headaches, which I've had 7 years plus experience of headaches. And I can tell you nightmares about pretty much any one of these. Blue-green deployments, double the infrastructure. And I've had people say to me, no, it's not, it's the same VM. Yes, it is. If you're running two resources of the exact same size on the exact same VM, that means you need more CPU and memory power to run them side by side. However short-lived that may be. I've seen VMs on Azure die a painful death because you spin up a site next to the other one and they both consume up all the memory and CPU, and then it goes ball of flames. Okay? There's a cost implication to that. Also, data synchronization. Redis caches. I don't know if you guys have ever used or heard of Redis, but if you use Redis cache and you've got two master systems, not being one a subscriber and one being a master, and they're both writing to the same Redis cache at the same time, Merry Christmas. It's going to be a long weekend. It causes havoc. Okay? Let me say this right. Canary. Complex. Massively complex. Developers despise this mechanism of deployment strategy purely because of the fact that they need to hide it from some people and show it to some people. Infrastructure engineers especially hide it. I hate this because they have to expose it again to some people and not the others. How do you do that? Do you do that based on group policies? Do you do that based on AD policies? Do you do it based on networking? The list goes on. That's where your headache comes in. How do you segregate your user base for testing? Do you do it at infrastructure level? Do you do it at runtime? Do you do it in development? It is, and no one wants to do it. Try and get every head from those departments in a room and ask them to do that. You'll have a fist fight, I promise you. Rolling deployment, the loving brother of deployments that everybody loves because it's pretty seamless. It does take a long time though, because you have to take stuff out, deploy to it, test it, put it back in, okay? Engineers hate that because it ruins their weekends if they have to sit and monitor that stuff. So automation is key when it comes to rolling deployments, especially monitoring of those deployments. Backwards compatibility is a nightmare as well because you've gone through half your infrastructure and all of a sudden, oops. Now what do you do with the half you've done? You've got to go and roll back. So when you build your deployment strategy, when you build your pipelines and your processes within Octopus, keep that in mind. Rollback is also a thing, and it will happen. Feature toggles, developers, not a big fan because they have to write additional code to do that. It doesn't just magically happen. Technical debt around feature toggles can be an absolute nightmare as well. If you've ever used Sonar on your code base and you've looked at your technical debt list, add feature toggles and see how that list grows. Immutable goes without saying. It's dogly expensive because you have to spin up duplicate infrastructure. For as short-lived as what it might be in some cases, it can become very expensive. And in most cases where people do immutable deployment strategies, they would spin it up, do proper testing and regression testing before they would spin down the previous architecture. Because you don't want to release new infrastructure out into the wild and not have the ability to say, oh yeah, we've tested it. Because there's nothing worse than then going on a call with a client and saying, yeah, we thought it worked. Okay, clients don't like that very much. So the hero's journey, this is the wordy slide I was talking about. You're welcome to read it on a PDF, but it's where I was 7 years ago with Unily, where we were doing. We were a small company, and to give you an idea of how we did a deployment before we did Octopus, I would get code from the developers. They would say, you're ready to deploy. I would have to open up Visual Studio, put in a package, take that package, publish it to my hard drive on a laptop. I then run this monstrous PowerShell script, which was an absolute nightmare to maintain, I might say. Many a weekends away on that. And I would take that script and it would zip up everything into a nice little MSI package for me. Here's where it got real fun. I'd have to take that MSI package, RDP to every single VM, because we didn't allow file shares on our VMs because of security, so I had to physically jump on a VPN, remote desktop to upload the file to OneDrive, log on the VM onto OneDrive, download the file, run another PowerShell script that took me about 3 months to develop, just to unpack that MSI package into IIS. A site took me hours to deploy, like literal hours. Did we have downtime? No. But who worked till 2 o'clock in the morning? Poor me, okay? And there was only one other engineer in the company that did it with me. And he was our security officer, so he always said, nah, it's your job, you do it. No, I'm joking. James was an absolute star, he always helped me. Not joking, he did help me a lot. Now imagine with that strategy, you'd have the development come to you and go, we've got a new feature, it's version 3.1.2, and that's literally a number. We need to get this to all the clients because it's also got a critical bug fix. I don't know what a cactus on a chair feels like, but I can describe it very well, because having to do 30 deployments rapidly because of a security issue with that deployment strategy, which I wouldn't call a strategy, was you start today you finish 3 days later. That's how long it took us to deploy 30 clients. Because you had to do a lot of testing and checking, speak to clients. Oh, by the way, Mr. Client, we're doing a deployment. Don't worry, you won't know about it, but it's happening. To January 2016, and I'll never forget that month, like I said to Martin, because it was a life changer for me. Because we went, this is enough. We started hitting good old Google, or for the Microsoft people, Bing, and we found Octopus, and we said, no, let's give it a try. Our first license was bought 3 months later because we went from days of deployments to sub 1 hour for all 30 clients. It took me a week to implement Octopus. It speaks for itself. We managed to do rolling deployments, 0 downtime to our clients. It was cost effective because back then the licensing wasn't horrible, but for a startup company, any cost is cost. But we decided to bite the bullet. And the nice thing is now if they come to me and say to me, do you want to deploy? And I went, sure, I would deploy. Okay. So why Octopus? There are 3 key points that I had to bring out. First off was seamless integration. We had no issue getting our code and our packages out of our CI/CD pipelines in Azure into Octopus. It was just literally dragging and dropping stuff. The developers at Octopus really thought that through, which I appreciated so much. Environment management, because we had over 400 VMs at one point. For the few clients we had a large infrastructure because these sites served quite a few people. And then rollback capability. You deploy, go, oops, that doesn't work. You literally just redeploy the previous release. And there's variable snapshotting inside of that, which means we didn't have to go and think, what variables changed? What do we need to do? It wasn't that easy. So 7 years on, where's Unily? We moved up to enterprise scale. Like I mentioned, we went from 30,000 users up to almost 5.5 million user base. It varies depending, like December, it's a lot lower. It turns out people don't like working in December. But we can no longer do rolling deployments. It's just too much. It'll take us back to the days of where it will take us days to roll out because there's so much infrastructure. And when I do the showcase, you'll see some of our stuff in the deployment process. It's no longer a site on a VM or on a few VMs. This is now multiple sites and services across, I don't even know what the word is, but the amount of infrastructure we have behind Unily is just enormous. So we moving into a blue-green deployment strategy. Because, hey, we've got money. We can up the VMs a little bit. Plus, our infrastructure guys have gotten a little bit clever since then, so they can up the resources. Plus, when the resources are not used, they just shut them down. And that's all automation that they start building. Okay. Pointing out Octopus, some of the stuff we've done there is security and compliance. That became a picture later in mind. Okay. Do think of security and compliance on day one, though, if you're starting a new journey on a deployment strategy. Or if you don't have it, do it now. Because when you start talking GDPR and InfoSec and data protection laws, nightmare, because we are a multi-data center company where we use 18 data centers across the globe. There's nothing as fun as having a call with an Australian client and goes, does my data ever leave Australia? And you go, yeah, we just temporarily, or we back up your data. No, doesn't happen. Germany, the US, all of them, you leave their data out of the geographical boundaries, you are in for a world of hurt because they will sue you. They cannot do it legally. Germany, I think, is by far some of the, I say Australia, Germany, Canada. Go and try and speak to one of those 3 clients in those regions and tell them their data has left their geographical boundary. They will have the lawyer on the very next call. Okay? Now, all of this, how does this impact your net dollar retention? That's a bit of a mind shift. Now we've gone back from tech back to business. For the tech people in this room, this is what keeps you employed. Okay, do have a listen. So, first off, improved customer experience. I've been on many calls in the last few years where you do a deployment and the client goes, oh, downtime, again. The word, I think it needs to be in a dictionary. It's painful. You get a proper deployment strategy out, you get happy clients. Happy clients remain clients. It's as simple as that. Startup gold. Why not enterprise gold? Because enterprise are typically settled, but we do have still features that we do develop, but it's not as vital as it is for a startup or a mid-tier company, because you are still trying to become competitive in the market. So you're still pushing a lot of new features out. Having a proper deployment strategy gives you the ability to push out those features faster, which means your clients that you have get those features and they are happier because they have a better system for it. And I have to say as well, net dollar retention is not just external net dollar retention. It's also internal. And it's a bit of a weird one to describe, but how much do you think it takes to employ someone, train them, till they become actually effective in their job? It's a lot of resourcing involved. You don't keep your internal people happy and they start talking about a water cooler. Ugh, system, it's down again. Why? This company sucks. They can't manage their systems. They leave. Now you have to employ a replacement. You have to train again. You have to go through the entire process. It's equipment churn, it's people churn. It's painful. Okay? So net dollar retention is also your your pocket from an HR perspective. Whoops, which is the churn. Sorry, went a bit of ahead of my speech. But yeah, it is vital that you keep that external churn with your clients to a minimum as well. And besides, all the sales dinners, they cost money. It's a lot more to get a new client than what it is to retain a client. And enhance reputation. So Unily didn't go from 30 clients with a great sales team. It also went from 30 clients to 400 plus clients because those clients talk to each other. They talk to other people that don't have an intranet. I've seen so many times people on the social media go, we need to put in a new intranet solution. Can anybody suggest something? And we'd get our name out there from other clients. Now, if you don't have a happy client base, you're not going to get that. Doesn't get you your foot in the door. Some of the strategies that you can use to boost your net dollar retention. Speak to your customers, internal and external. For the techie people, I call it techie. I used to be a techie. I used to be an architect and a developer for many years. If someone came to me and said, this client's unhappy, they want to have a call with someone. Where'd you find us? I'm gone. Not my job. Go speak to the customer success manager or go speak to, I don't know, anybody else but me. The biggest thing I've learned in life is to take that challenge there alone and turn it into an opportunity. Get on a call with the client. If you have to apologize, you apologize. But get their feedback as the most important thing and work with them as if they are working with you. Don't see them as a threat or someone that wants to shout at you, because yes, let them shout at you. But take that opportunity and get to the bottom reason why they are unhappy. So the number 2 reasons why clients are unhappy, and this is from experience now, is communications. Bad communications or people not willing to communicate. And people will leave for that reason. And the second one is downtime, in our case. Because why? It's an intranet. If it's not available, no one can use it. Downtime, not a great thing, for whatever reason that may be. Monitor and optimize your deployment strategy and processes monthly, weekly, daily, hourly, as it happens. Okay? It's pointless if you have a deployment strategy but it doesn't run or it doesn't work. Weird one, speak to people. Again, where's the techies? No, I don't do networking, I don't speak to people. It's my department, I don't speak to that department. Change that mindset as quickly as possible. Stop siloing departments. Get departments to work together. We're going through the phase now where we're spending quite a lot of money on learning how to do cross-collaboration between departments. So I'll have operations, infrastructures, InfoSec, DevOps, support, QA, 6 desks. I'll have them all together on one desk and say, you are now this team. We are now developing this feature. You are developing the feature, not the developers. There's a developer and 5 other people that have to work together. Ensure you do that. It is mind-blowing how they all of a sudden realize, oh, hell, downtime's a thing. We can't just deploy this. And automation. Think of it from day one. Tools like Octopus has got some great features behind it to help you with this. Unily made that mistake of not thinking of automation on day one. We just went for ease. And we had to build our own tool because our systems became so complex, we sadly outgrew some of the things we could do. But this is where Octopus shone above the competitors. The rich APIs behind it saved our lives because it allowed us to be able to use it as part of our tool set. Some of the most expensive lessons I've learned, variables. From an operational expenditure, this has cost me more time and headaches than anything else. And I'm a very transparent person, but we caused about 7 P1 incidents 2 weeks ago. I had 7 clients fuming because why? An engineer made a mistake with a single variable. That can hurt you financially. You'd be surprised. Think how you want to manage your variables and store them, and the complexities behind them. One variable referencing another, referencing another, referencing another. Stop. Okay? Automation, again, and you're going to hear this over and over and over. It's easier to get stuff done when you don't have to have, I need an engineer. Where am I going to find one? Oh, no problem. It's scheduled. Bye. Big difference in how you have conversations with people. Again, talk to people, feedback, get them. And even if you don't have the angry client, you don't have people shouting, you don't have people standing at a water cooler going, ugh. Go and get the feedback. Go and speak to your clients. You'd be surprised how many clients go, you're actually asking me for feedback. Thanks. Here's my list. You'd be shocked what you hear in those conversations, especially if you initiate them, because people tend to be more open if they're not in that anger state. Constantly review. We never did that. We'd go and I'd have 4 or 5 engineers work on a deployment process. Someone would go and change something. Someone else would go and change something else. And before you know it, why is our deployment taking 2 hours again? You have to constantly review it. That's a very expensive lesson I've learned, and we started doing it a couple of years ago, and we've paid dividends ever since. And self-service. In a showcase, I'll show you one of the ways that we do self-service at Unily. But again, from an operational expense, client needs to change their certificate. Let me go find this engineer to go and do it for you. Why not build automation behind it that's got self-service enabled for the client, and they can go and do it themselves? Okay? So, how do we do some of these things? And I'll start with a review one. This is actually something I worked on while I was at breakfast this morning. This is our deployment rate, which you guys can't see because the presentation is still running. Brilliant. Now you should see it. So I actually did this morning. I did that, and I review that twice a month. There's other things I review as well, but I do that on purpose because I want to see how many deployments, excuse me, that went bad. I want to see how many deployments we have, how many are going out. And this is month by month, starting on December 2020. You can see we went from, Decembers are quiet. I send people on holiday. Please don't do deployments in December. People need to break. But then January, hey, Merry Christmas. It's gone. You start preparing for the next one. But you can see how deployment rates have gone up. Now the reason why I have this, particularly this morning, is because what do you notice on May? Yeah, 72 compared to, what, 2,500, 2,200. So my head developer and my deployment team lead, gentlemen, what's broken? That's literally a Teams conversation I had this morning. So now they are off going to investigate. It brings us back to review. You have to do it. Otherwise, if there's problems in the system, you're not going to know about it till the clients start coming to you and going, why don't I have this bug fix? Okay. So from an API perspective, I thought I'd show some code for the techies. So you'll see a website called Manage, or Unily Management. It's a site that my department built for Unily. It's like, we consider it like our Azure portal. We've got plenty of services within that site, and one of them, the code you're seeing here, for example, goes and fetches expiration of certificates. This is part of the self-service that we have done with clients, where a client can upload a certificate, the system will go and upload a new certificate. But here's one thing we did that we got from feedback. Clients don't like it when stuff's broken and they have to tell us it's broken. Turns out it's not a great thing. So we built a monitoring system that would use the certificate store in Octopus, hence the method of expires between. And 60 days before a certificate expires, we start sending emails. And we'll send an email every 10 days to every active user in ServiceNow against that company to say, hey, your certificate's about to expire. You should think of updating it before your site goes no. Okay? On 30 days, it starts sending the email every 5 days. And on 10 days, it starts sending the email every single day. Turns out our P1 incident rate for expired certificates or secrets, we've got another system for secrets that we've built, has gone from a lot to, we had a P1 for certificates. It rarely happens, purely because we don't have that problem anymore, because we've used the APIs. So from an automation perspective, this is purposefully almost a little bit small. I don't want to expose too much client data, but it's fine. So we've built a calendar where the business users from a day-to-day perspective can actually see how many deployments or what deployments we have done. So if I go to April, you can see it's quite a fairly busy thing. But you can see on that day alone, all the deployments that happened on the 20th of April. Over 103 deployments in one day. How many deployment engineers do I have employed? 3. They do other stuff as well. I call them deployment engineers. They build mobile apps and other things as well. But how many deployments did they physically do? They only did the ones at the top. The blue ones are production. Well, the darkish blue ones are production. The turquoise ones are staging. The green ones are all automated. Not a single engineer touched those. It's just the system deployed it. How did we build this? An example of it is in Manage, we've built a system called ELSA. Well, we didn't build ELSA. We took the ELSA framework, which is a workflow system for .NET, and we built that into Manage. And we built some activities, which is hence all those services you saw in the code. And those activities, we built some workflows. Now, why did we do workflows? Because every time some logic changes, I don't want to redeploy Manage. I just want to go in the workflow system and go, fix it. Okay? Downtime is a feature. The lack of downtime, shall I say, is a feature. So we've decided on a workflow system that we built and manage. Okay? So there's loads of workflows that we have built inside of Manage. Like, a lot. Even some of our automation things. So as I've mentioned, we've got, if you are really squinty, I can zoom in. We are fortunate enough to have about 591 projects at the moment in Octopus. Very proud of that number for some reason, I don't know why. Why shouldn't I be proud of that number? I'm going to admit this openly. We thought of things too late, and we didn't speak to Octopus. We didn't speak to people like Aniko. We didn't speak to consultants. We were, no, we'll figure it out. We'll Google it. Or these days, I'll ask AI. Okay? Stop doing that. Speak to people. Get partnerships. Work with them. That 591 projects there should be 10. Why? It's because we don't use multi-tenancy. And because of the hole we dug ourselves, because of variables and all other things, we are now going through a very lengthy process of getting that number down. But currently, every single client, every single service has got a project. It's not the right way of doing it. It works for us. But like I said, speak to people. Okay? Our deployment process as a whole, just to give you guys an idea of what we've built, is it will go and do certain things like fetch variables, check if the deployment's actually needed. Here's a little gotcha. Have you ever had a deployment engineer deploy a site only to have a P1 raised 5 minutes later and go, why is my site down? Oh, we're deploying it. Well, you're not supposed to. Oops. It happens. Humans, we make mistakes. Deal with it. So what do? You ask the engineer to say, hey, this is my deployment number. And the system will actually go, you're not allowed to deploy this now. Stop. I've had so many times the engineer go, oh, thanks for doing that. You saved my bacon, because they hate being the middleman of trouble. Okay? After it does that, it enables downtime. So it goes, we use a system called Datadog for our monitoring. So we actually go and tell Datadog, by the way, this client's being deployed. Stop telling everybody it's down. Okay? It's actually needed. And then from there, it's the usual huff buff. We stop the site, we check some services, and then, remember I told you guys in the beginning it was one site, and now it's multiple sites. So the first thing we do is we deploy a document processor site, currently being re-architected to run as a function in Azure. We deploy an identity service site. We deploy an API gateway site. Why did I click on you? After the API gateway site, we deploy a workflow site, because Unily has workflows in it. After the workflow site, we deploy the SMTP app service, because it's not MailMonkey, but I think we are a strong competitor for it these days, because Unily can do targeted emails using your content from your intranet. And then do we get to the Unily site, 17 steps later. And then, the list goes on, we configure all the services. So we've deployed all the stuff, now we need to tell it how to run that stuff. And then we start the upgrade. Well, hold on, what have you been doing till now? Well, we've just been deploying stuff. We didn't physically upgrade the stuff. That's the difference. The upgrades being, we tell the system to go and do the IA changes. In other words, go and change your SQL schema, go and change whatever you need to, in Elasticsearch, for example. And then last but not least, we wake up the site. Now, what do you mean by wake up? Turns out IIS doesn't play well after it's been stopped and shut down or redeployed and you bring it back up. All the memory caches are gone. All the view caches are gone. So part of our monitoring tool, we built some logic into the system to go and say, go and rebuild all your caches so that when the first user hits it, they don't feel the pain of waiting for a site to build its caches. It's one of the things we do. And then last but not least, market deployment complete, which again, I don't know why I clicked on it, and disable the service downtime. Let me go up. Now, a lot of these things in our process, we've done as modules. Inside of Octopus, we use script modules. We just find them very useful because I can change them out without having to change my deployment process. Now, Why is my deployment process such a nightmare? Because I've got 400 plus other sites that has the exact same process, and if I change one step in that process, I have to go and do it 400 other times. How did Octopus help us on that? Hey, guess what? API first, to your rescue. We can literally take this deployment process, and this is the funniest project ever. And some people laugh at this. And this is not me that did it. It is my engineers. Where is it? Oh, it's called SEPT. Service Engineering Process Testing. That's what SEPT stands for, I believe. So this one uses GitHub to store the process. And the guys would change the processes here, and they would switch between branches for whatever, who's doing what. Great feature in Octopus, by the way. Absolute lifesaver if you've got multiple engineers working on the same process. And we built a little console app that would take this code out of GitHub and push it to all 400 plus projects. Takes about 2 hours, but I don't have to have engineers go and update the same thing 400 times. Again, automation. It's not just deployment, it's automating the process. And I'm out of time. Last but not least, I have to mention this because of Nico and being data engineers. Data is data for life, and you need to use it. If you don't know how to use your data, please speak to Nico. Okay? One thing that we do, for example, this is an example from an internal test site. We capture actual analytics across our deployments from our deployment process into ServiceNow. So I know when the deployment process starts in Octopus, when it ends in Octopus. So I know Octopus took 26 minutes to do whatever it needed to do. Is that Octopus's fault? Nah, it's just our infrastructure is rather vast. Okay? We also know when the engineer clicked on the start button, when someone got an email saying your deployment is starting, and when the deployment ends. So I know when my process, how long that took. I know how long my client impact was, and I also knew how long my engineer spent on that job. Those 3 points, you'd be shocked how often you have to monitor that and start looking for slippage, especially client impact time and engineer time. I could care little how long Octopus takes. I could care the whole world about how long these two take. I don't want engineers to spend a lot of time on deployments. This is long. 39 minutes is excessively long. Their normal time is about 3 minutes. And total client impact speaks volumes for itself. Right, that is me.
Thank you very much, Mick. I hope you enjoyed that. It certainly covered a lot of detail. We are going to have a break for coffee in a few minutes, but there's time to have a couple of questions now, and if we don't get to your questions, we can cover them on the panel discussion. So does anyone have any comments or questions? I know there's SAP deployment working on hyperscaler environments, and Porrick, you're working IBM Cloud and others here. You know, what's your any questions for Michéle? Yep, Stephen.
What do you consider to be the difference between a canary deployment and a restricted beta test?
The word beta for one. So a restricted canary test is more for your end users. So beta test is typically internal. This is on my verbiage. If you're going external as well.
The first customer deployment.
Yeah.
And often, like for example, Google says this is a beta test.
Yeah.
And it's restricted when it goes to you. But that, I don't know whether there's any difference at all between what you define as canary testing.
No, if you're saying that beta testing, like I'm a Google Maps user, I'm a local 7 guide, and I get access to the, what do they call it, the augmented reality on the maps.
Yeah.
Not everybody has that. That's a canary test. It's one and the same thing for me. I do have different verbiage for internal, where you've got beta release testing internally. So we use a site called Rockstars for dog footing, and only some people get access, or something like that. You do have different verbiage, but if you're talking external public to your actual clients, it is the same, one and the same thing. Yeah.
From a security critical vulnerabilities that need to be rolled out?
Ooh, the fun one. So we've had various ways of doing it. We've stopped doing some of them for various reasons, and I'll cover two of them. The first one, we used to do it in the past, is the developers would go off, Umbraco, for example, had a security vulnerability where you could actually get access to the web.config file. And we tested it. We could get access to the web.config file for ASP.NET's website. Huge fun. I had a call with Microsoft and they almost blew their lid. You're trying to hack us? No, we're not. We're just telling you. A couple of companies had the problem. Anyways, I'm divert. So we had to patch that as soon as possible. Our developers gave us a DLL and said, you need to get this on all the sites immediately. That was literally a case of writing a script that would go through Octopus. I don't know if you're aware, Octopus has got like a script console where you can target all your environments or specific VMs, but you could basically run a script. So we took the DLL, put it into a shared folder, wrote a little PowerShell script before AI days, because nowadays you just go, AI, do me something that does this. So you would run that script and it would literally copy the DLL into all of the sites. And then what we'd do is we'd have to recycle those VMs to get that DLL to apply. Why we stopped doing it that way is because if someone redeploys an existing version, bye-bye DLL. So it became complex. Now what we do today, because of no downtime, you'll deploy it as part of your deployment strategy. I would recommend you build a proper package that has that. Deprecate the previous package, like even delete it out of your systems if you need to, especially if there's a security vulnerability in it. Remove it from a deployment system and do a no downtime deployment. Typically, because there's no architectural changes, you can do like a rolling deployment. So you'll do a VM, take it out the load balancer, deploy, put it back in. That's why we do rolling deployments. Okay. But there's other ways, but those are the two main ones that people typically do.
Another question.
Yep.
Did you hit the jackpot when you discovered Octopus Deploy, or did you discover others? And if you did, why did you?
The reason why we took Octopus was a couple of reasons. First off, cost back then, Octopus was fairly cheap to market. It was new in the marketplace. We looked at stuff like Jenkins was just out the door back then as well, I believe. Or was it Teams? I can't remember which one. The complexity of trying to implement it, Octopus won hands down. We took, like any other approach, we took 3 engineers and we said, you test that, you test that, you test that. Let's see who can build the thing the quickest. Octopus, we had up and running within a day and we could deploy something. The others, the guys were still churning about trying to figure out how to configure the thing. And that's why we chose Octopus. It's just pure simplicity, one hands down, and pricing was obviously quite an attractive model at that time. Yeah. Any other questions?
Okay.
What time or effort is needed if you need to move from a different deployment to Octopus deployment? Like already done?
There are so many variables behind that, and depends on your complexities. It is impossible for me to answer that. If you're just saying that you're moving a NuGet package that gets deployed to an Azure function, for example, building that in Octopus, if you have the package for me built from what system you use, push it into Octopus, which if I think Azure DevOps, that takes you 2 minutes to add it to your pipeline. It's not very complex. There's already pre-based templates in Azure DevOps. You can build that in under a day. It's not that complex. But again, I say that with a massive caveat. It really depends on the complexity of your systems. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the comments that we see in our environments and customers is it's a gradual replacement.
Yeah.
You know, it's really a question of are you doing automated deployments, successfully and delivering in all of those areas, but you can complement, it complements Azure DevOps, and we're seeing there.
Sort of on the back of your question, we're moving from Azure VMs now, and we're moving over to Kubernetes. It's a framework they call strangling the monolith. So we're essentially taking this massive product and we're breaking it up into smaller services and we're moving it over to Kubernetes. That's a 2.5-year, multi-million-dollar project, not a one-day job. You see the difference.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, when you talked about churn, in customers, but also in employees. And when you're kind of low-coding runbooks, so the great minds have put this in place, then you're leaving behind an asset for the organization that can be reused again and again. And you have kind of a common platform deployed to many customers. You know, there's the different kinds of clients we're working with, you know, and we'll get to that in the panel session later. They have, you know, different kinds of applications. That's another kind of customer where they're increasingly adding deployment automation for each new service catalog item they have. So we're going to take 15 to 20 minutes for coffee. You're free to leave the room. We'll come back and we'll let you know. And we'll begin then a panel discussion where you can think of some other questions you might want to add, but we'll lead that first. So thank you very much, Michéle.